What happens when one man tries to watch all the horror films of the 1980s? Well, we're about to find out because I'm your host, Josh Spiegel, and this is the 80s Project. It's time once again for the 80s Project, and yeah, we are watching all of the horror films of 1985 right now, and this year has been a bit of up and down. It's kind of a mixed bag. I mean, the lows have been pretty low, but the highs have been really high. And let's get this episode going because, yep, there's another one of those highs in here. Let's start this one with the first of several TV entries, and this one aired on July 28th, although it did play a couple of film festivals before that, but it's Blackout. And I'm interested in this one because I remember that box art from the video shelves, but never rented it. We kick things off with a woman arriving to a birthday party only to discover the whole family dead, and the husband, Ed, missing. They believe he's responsible, and look at how close this car is to this logging truck. I mean, haven't they seen Final... Oh, yeah. This is 1985. Well, they try to pass it by going around a bend, which causes them to wreck, and I guess their car was made out of the nitroglycerin from old cartoons because it instantly explodes. Well, one of the occupants survives and is told he was massively injured, but they didn't find any identification on him, and he has no memory, so no one knows who he is. Turns out the car was registered to Alan Devlin, but they don't know if that's him or the other passenger who died, but they surmise that he's Alan. He's told this by one of the Warriors, and he's involved with Kathleen Quinlan, a married woman, who's also the nurse in charge of Alan. Turns out that he'll need a good amount of facial reconstruction, and when they finally fix it up, he looks like Special Agent Frank Lundy. He's soon well enough to take day trips, and he bonds with Chris, which turns romantic, something that Mike doesn't take too well. 6 years go by, and he ends up married to her, and they've started a new life together. And meanwhile, that cop that was charged with finding Ed Vincent, the husband from the beginning, is retired because he can't close the case, and gets a newspaper article in the mail with a picture of Alan, who bears a strong resemblance to Vincent. He tracks him down and talks to him, showing him pictures of the dead Vincent family, but Alan doesn't remember anything. But he does cooperate. It seems that Steiner believes that Alan sent him that article himself because the part of him that's still Vincent is afraid he's going to kill again. But is he right? Or is there something perhaps a bit more obvious going on? And if this all seems a bit too drama to be horror, well, soon a man in that poster zipper mask shows up and tries to go on the attack. So this was a TV movie, but it was made for HBO and was directed by Douglas Hickox, who we last saw on the project back in '83 with an adaptation of The Hound of the Baskervilles. Now, it didn't make a big splash when it was released, but shortly after, it got a bit of notoriety when a man named Ed Sherman used the film as an inspiration for the real-life murder of his wife and unborn child. Like in the film, he tried to use an air conditioner to slow down her body's decomposition as he set up an alternate alibi. However, he was caught and sent to jail where he died of a heart attack. And this is decent. It's a 3. It's a cool little thriller that's not as predictable as it seems, although it's not really gonna stick with you. The horror cultural significance is just a 1 since it didn't get much attention, although it did show up on some video store shelves like mine, but not all that frequently. Should you watch it? Maybe. It's actually not a bad little thriller, and it's a good time, but don't expect to be blown away or anything. Here's another TV movie, and this one actually aired on the same day, July 28th, but on a completely different network. And it's Murder in Space. And this one has a crazy story. The beginning introduces us to our international set of characters, and that includes Daryl Revick, and they're aboard the spaceship, the Conestoga. They lose contact with them though, and Blair is here as well, and he's told that they think that they've located the ship after 9 weeks. Up on the Conestoga, it seems that they're unhappy with the captain's leadership and intend to file a report about him, but he says that they were sent off course by a meteor shower, but they're all fine. There's some tension between the US factions and the Russians, and an affair between two of the astronauts. But then there's an emergency. Turns out that Olga is killed, and they don't know how she died, so they try a new setup where they plug in the body to their medical analysis system to do a sort of space computer autopsy. They're concerned she died of some sort of space virus, but there's no signs of that, and the results are inconclusive, at least in front of the Russians. Privately, she says Olga had a bunch of drugs in her system, and the probable cause of death was asphyxiation. She was also pregnant 2 months, so it's clear that it happened on the mission. The crew on board don't deal with things very well, and the members start to suspect each other, and down on Earth, they figure out that someone up there is a murderer. And is space jurisdiction different? Is it like maritime law? Things get intense on board as they become aware that there's a killer amongst them and start to winnow down the suspect and determine which of them was responsible. Time's running out though, because more of them start getting killed off, so they have a space slasher on their hands. But who done it? So this one is interesting because it was a bit of an experiment. It was run on Canadian TV, and the first time that it aired, it didn't have the ending. There was a point where it cuts off, and they did a contest for viewers to figure out who they thought the killer was. They had to submit a form where they had to prove they watched the film by identifying who the victims were and how they were killed, and then they had to guess the murderer. A winner was then randomly drawn from the correct entries, with the prize being a trip on the Orient Express. The funny thing is that they didn't get any correct guesses, so they had to go with a winner who was the closest, but they didn't get the grand prize and instead only won a 1-year magazine subscription. And yeah, after a few days, they ran the end of the movie and people could see the end of the mystery. And I'm giving it a 2, since it's a whole lot of talking in rooms and very little action. It's maybe more of a space murder mystery than a horror film, but it's billed as a sort of a space slasher, but it's just not thrilling at all. The HCS is just a 1.5 since it's not much known or talked about and really obscure, and the 0.5 is only for the handful of known stars attached. Should you watch it? Maybe if you want to take a crack at the mystery, but honestly, it's not that interesting.
It means, David, that one of you is a murderer.
It's time for another TV movie, and another one from Canada to boot, but this one doesn't have a confirmed release date, and it's just known to have come out in 1985, and it's Shock Chamber, otherwise known as Greedy Terror. It begins with a reporter doing a story about a set of quadruplets, and their mother is there, so he starts talking to her about their stories. It's an anthology, and the first tale is called Symbol of Victory, and has a young guy named Ron, and he likes the secretary at his father's company and asks her out, and she says yes, but isn't into it. After the date, she invites him back to her place, and he asks her to be his girlfriend, and they're interrupted by a man at the door selling exotic elixirs, and gives Ron his card. He seeks him out and wants to buy a love potion, and the dude has one, and has to mix it into her drink, and he says that she has to drink the whole thing. He goes over to her house again, and I have to say, if she's not that much into the guy, just maybe don't keep inviting him to your place. Well, the serum works, but it's only temporary, and if he wants more, it's going to cost him $1,000, which causes him to get in deep. But there's more to all of this than meets the eye, and that potion peddler turns out to be one of the woman's sons. But then, there's the second story, called Country Hospitality, featuring another son, this one named Cameron, played by the same actor, and he's on a trip to the countryside, and his car breaks down out there, all to the sound of the weirdest Casio keyboard soundtrack of all time. He goes to the local diner and meets the waitress there and basically instantly falls in love with her, but then drops dead because the entire town has this racket where they kill the people who come to town and rob them, but greed leads to more problems. The last story is about another brother, this one named Stan, and the story is called The Injection. But this one has two brothers, with one again played by Doug Stone, and they have a plan to cash in on Nick's life insurance policy by injecting him with a serum that will make him appear to be dead. Of course, things don't quite go according to plan. So, this was again shot for TV, Canadian TV, and was both written and directed by Steve DeMarco. It was his first film, but he'd go on to have a really long career after this, mostly in TV, with very occasional dips into film, and was working up until his death in 2020. It seems this one was aired under the title of Greedy Terror, but was changed to Shock Chamber for its home release and given more of a horror makeover to attract attention, although it was rather unsuccessful. And I'll give it a 2. It's not awful, but it is bad, and really damn predictable. The stories are also around a half hour each and feel like they're about 10 minutes of content apiece, just stretched out. The HCS is just a 1 though, since it's not known at all and no one talks about this movie, and I don't even recall seeing it on video shelves. Should you watch it? You can probably skip it. Shocking, I know. We're finally getting away from films that were made for television, but staying with things that don't have confirmed release dates with the New York Centerfold Massacre. It has a young woman being berated by her mother for the way she's dressed, and then 2 women at the police talk about being groped by a wannabe photographer, but he says he can't do anything about it and stumbles over his lines like 4 times, but they just use it because who needs more than one take, right?
Yeah, he played a scam over in Jersey a few years ago.
We then meet that guy and he has a girl up to his place and he promises her great success as a model. Seems like models have been appearing dead and chopped up, and they suspect Martino since several of them shot with him, so he's their main guy for it. Well, our main girl goes down to an audition, only the place is dirty and gross, and it turns out that someone is there with devious intentions and a bag on their head, and some of the dodgiest editing that I have ever seen. So, this one was by Louis Ferriol, and he's only done a handful of films, several of them shorts, and all of them kinda sleazy. And I can't talk about this one for long because the full movie doesn't exist. A big chunk of this one has been lost. It's said that a full half of it has never been released and was accidentally deleted during production, and then more was deleted. Seems that one of the crew members took a videotape with footage on it and put it into the camcorder thinking it was a blank, and they filmed with it, going over the things that were shot. Since the women in the film were actual models, Ferriol couldn't afford to ask them back to reshoot. They then scraped together a cut of the film and sold it via mail order, but then all of the master tapes were destroyed in a warehouse fire, so the only versions that still exist are crappy VHS dupes of those mail order copies. Someone then pulled together a new version and inserted some shots of women stripping, and that footage is noticeably different than the older stuff. And this is hard to rate, but I'll give it a 2. It has a weird, grimy charm to it, and some of the dialogue is actually pretty funny, but it's just a hodgepodge of scenes that don't really count as a movie. The significance is just a 1 again, and it's probably the least significant film on the project so far, since it never got a release outside of mail order and is mostly lost. Should you watch it? Maybe as a strange curiosity, but you can probably just pass as well. We're still dealing with films with no known release date, and here's another one that's just known to be in '85, and it's Murder Elite. This one starts with a girl in the woods being chased by a man with a knife, and he catches her and kills her. We're then on a little farm out in the countryside with lots of horses. Alan McGraw lives there, as does Mrs. Blaylock, and we see them just do their average day-to-day stuff for a while Diane flirts with stable boy Ron. But then the police arrive, and they're investigating that murder from the intro in the area, but there's been others as well. So, Diane has only recently come back to the farm after spending all of her family money while away in the US, and has to come back to live with her sister Margaret, who's been there the whole time holding down the fort. They don't get along anymore because of that, and Diane wants them to try to sell the farm. But Margaret is vehemently opposed to that, as it isn't what their father would have wanted. She continues to sleep around with Roy, trying not to be seen by Margaret, and it's mentioned that the murders only started when Diane came back to town, and she seems to be trying to convince Ron to help her out with her plans. When Jimmy's mom is found dead of an accident, he's suspected, and the farming life just weighs too heavily on Diane, so her thoughts turn to murder. And this is a British film, and I'll admit, it's another one that I had never even heard the name of before doing this. And it's directed by Claude Wadham, and he only did a few things after this, but had been directing since the late 50s and worked on a bunch of TV shows. And that's weird, because this movie feels like it could be a TV movie, and even has some fade to blacks, like they were prepping for a commercial break. But it was not, and was intended for the film market. And this was near the end of McGraw's film career, and keep in mind, she was really well known as a model in the 60s and 70s, and was in just a few big films in the 70s, and right after this was just on Dynasty for a while, and did a couple more small-scale films, and then retired from acting. But for a movie billed as a type of slasher, there's very little horror happening, and next to no slashing, and wasn't any sort of success. And it's just a 1.5 from me. This is a straight up slog to get through. It's not helped by McGraw being woefully miscast as the femme fatale, but it's an hour and 40 minutes long, and could easily have been around 40 minutes shorter without changing the narrative one iota. The significance is just a 1, since it's nearly completely unknown and never discussed, and most of the names involved are smaller scale. Should you watch it? You can skip it. It's not Murder Elite or anything elite, really. We have one more movie to talk about that doesn't have a confirmed release, and it's time for the epic battle of bikers versus the undead. It begins with a man talking to a group of bikers and introducing a new sort of drug, but they're not having it and turn him away, which makes him a very sad drug dealer. It's all shot on video, and they're camping out near a cemetery by a creek, and it's called Coffin Wash because occasionally a grave will get eroded and the coffin will come downstream. Sure enough, that night a zombie emerges from the ground, and then a whole mob of them begin their march. They attack the bikers and they fight, and the movie's delivering on its title within the first 10 minutes. They figure out they're vulnerable to fire, so they finally are able to fight them off. So they go to the sheriff for help, but he doesn't believe them. But then there's news reports of people around town going missing, and others are becoming zombified thanks to that polluted water. Well, the bikers are the only ones that know what's going on, so they opt to round up the other biker gangs and take the fight to the undead. But not before Flack tells stories about being in Nam with his fellow biker, Big Ed. But it's too late for him, he's been bitten. But first, a musical number. And they call in the Metal Maniacs and round up the whole crew to head down to Coffin Wash for a confrontation. But that drug dealer is there too, and he has plans of his own. And this is very clearly an ultra-low budget endeavor, and it was by James R. Buick and represents his only foray into the film world. There's very little information floating around about this one out there, except that it was filmed somewhere outside of Phoenix, Arizona, and they did a casting call on a local television show to get people to come and play bikers and zombies, and seemingly had a whole bunch of folks show up because there's a mess of extras in this one. And I'll give it a 2. It's fairly terrible, but there's a decent amount of homemade charm to it, and I am impressed at the sheer amount of people that they were able to get involved. The HCS is another one because this is really unknown and there's not a single face in it that you will recognize. Should you watch it? It's safe to skip, but I'll admit I didn't hate it.
Fornicating with the handmaiden of the devil. Ripped my poor sinning flesh with a pain like fire and brimstone.
It's time to get the films that are somewhat known, and this next one does have a sort of confirmed release date since it came out sometime in August of '85, and it's Biohazard. We're out in the desert and a couple of military guys are lost, and there's also a man in a radiation suit with a Geiger counter, and there's a research facility out there. They're doing tests with Lisa Martin, a psychic woman played by Angelique Petitjean, and their big project is some sort of matter transporter that can bring things over from another dimension. Lisa is the key to the project, and they fire it up, but something seems to go wrong, and the guy outside is fried. Some sort of container appears, and the military guys just want to box it up and take it with them, and Carter is responsible for the transport. But then, as they're heading through the dirt roads, something emerges from the box and goes on the attack, and it's a little creature. They go back to the facility, where Lisa says that she can feel fear from it, and they realize that they can use one of the other items that they've materialized to trace its radiation signature. Carter spends some time with Lisa, and they get together in what is easily the most awkward makeout scene I've seen recently. But that alien beast is on the prowl, hanging upside down, and killing dudes, and is vaguely xenomorphish. But there's also this other device that came across dimensions, and it's growing in size, but I love that it's clearly like cardboard and duct tape, but there's this adorable little fella inside. But then that other monster continues to kill, and our heroes have to try to find it before it's too late. Oh, and speaking of too late, when the paramedics show up to try to save the life of the guy attacked by the little worm monster, check out this sterling CPR technique. And this is another entry on the project from Fred Olin Ray, and it's the first time we're seeing him since '83's Scalps. But he also did the Alien Dead back in '80, and we'll be seeing him quite a bit as we go on. The budget on this one was provided by a company called Eastern Hemisphere, but in around 8 days into shooting, they suddenly pulled all of the financing. Luckily, this was right around the time of the film market season, so he took what they'd already shot and showed it to investors there, and managed to get enough to finish things off. Meanwhile, there's two things. First, the little monster is played by Ray's own 7-year-old son, and they wanted a small monster that could more convincingly pop out of hidden places. Second, I have to talk about the ending, because it ends on a cliffhanger where Lisa reveals that she's actually also an alien, but that's not the weird part. Carter reacts to this and then simply says,
I think that's it.
and makes a cut motion, and the movie ends. And according to Ray, he says that he forgot to call cut, and the actor, William Fair, said that to try to end the scene, and they decided to just leave it in because it was funny and weird. And when told that it was too strange to end it that way, Ray's exact words were, "I don't care." And this is a 2.5. There's fun moments, but then it has these big lulls of actions that bog things down. If it were able to maintain that insanity for the whole runtime, I'd probably rank it higher. The HCS is just a 1.5 though, because it did get some attention and was talked about as an Alien ripoff, but just never reached any higher in terms of recognition. Should you watch it? Probably. It's got some fun stuff, and that ending has to be seen to be believed.
Little Ed. Well, he sure is cute.
Well, now here's the big one, the one you've all been waiting for, and easily this block's biggest name. And on August 2nd, I bid you welcome to Fright Night. We're in suburbia and meet Herman and his head, and his girlfriend, Marcy Darcy. They're watching a TV show showing old vampire movies, hosted by Cornelius, and they're making out, but he gets distracted by two guys next door carrying in a very ornate coffin. Charlie's best friend is a hoax, and what the hell is this sweater he's wearing? What is that? But that night, he sees a woman go into the neighbor's house and then hears a scream, and the next day sees that she's been murdered on the news. And his distracted manner irritates Amy, and then he says the thing.
Oh, you're so cool, Brewster!
But then in the evening, he sees another girl over there and watches as Prince Humperdinck shows off a pair of fangs and a clawed hand. He also sees him transform into some sort of flying creature and dispose of the body, but is spotted by the fruit-eating Dandridge. The police can't help, and his friends think he's crazy, and his mom accidentally invites him in, allowing him access to their house. So, there's only one person that he can go to for help, and that's Peter Vincent, vampire killer and horror host. Too bad he doesn't believe him either, but Evil Ed and Amy are able to convince him with a little bit of cash to humor them and help prove that Jerry is just a normal guy and not actually a killer vamp. Problem is that they then do the exact opposite thing, and it turns out that Amy bears a shocking resemblance to one of Jerry's past loves, and now it's up to our crew to try to survive. And what a banger of a movie, and it's written and directed by Tom Holland, and believe it or not, it was his first film. Like sure, he had written quite a few before this, but it was his first shot at directing. He had written enough hit films like Class of 1984, Psycho 2, and Cloak and Dagger that he had a little bit of pull, and wrote this film specifically as his first shot at being in the chair. The role of Peter Vincent was actually written to be Vincent Price, but Price had had enough with the horror genre by this point and turned it down. Chris Sarandon was skeptical about it as well, but after reading the script and meeting with Holland, he became fascinated with the character, and it was his suggestion to play up the more human elements of him. It was also his idea to have Jerry be a sort of a fruit bat and constantly eating apples. They were given a budget of around $9 million and a good amount of practical effects, including that full-on wolf transformation. There's also that crazy shark mouth that Vampire Amy sports in the film, and that was a last-minute addition. By the time they shot it, they had spent all the FX budget and couldn't really do anything major. But Random William Cook said he'd whip something cheap up over the weekend, with the promise that it would only be shown for a second or two. Well, it ended up looking cooler than anyone thought, to the point that it got a lot of attention in the movie and wound up on the poster. And the reviews were good, and even Roger Ebert, notorious horror movie hater, really enjoyed it. And it did pretty well, if not major business, earning around $25 million in ticket sales. But then the fan base exploded even bigger on the home market. It spawned a sequel a few years later in 1988 with Fright Night Part 2, and in the late 80s the story was continued in a cool run of comic books from Now Comics. There was also a novelization released in '85 by Craig Spector and John Skipp that fleshes out some extra details. Much later, in 2011, a remake was released with Colin Farrell as the villain, with the late Anton Yelchin as Charlie, and that film had its own sequel, even though it wasn't even in continuity with the first one. It's kind of weird. In 2020, Holland said he would love to make a direct sequel, bringing back anyone he could, and wanted to call it Fright Night Resurrection, and bring back Jerry and Billy from the dead, but there's been no movement at all on that. There's also been a number of newer comic book spin-offs and even an official prequel novel called Fright Night Hellbound that explores the adventures of Jerry and Billy in the 70s. And I love it. I'll give it a 4.5. It's one of my favorite vampire movies, and even though I think it has a couple of sticking points, like the fact that Charlie's not all that likable, it sticks with me. It's just a cool blend of classic vampire films and also more modern slants, and it works perfectly. The HCS is a 4 since it was a nice hit but not a blockbuster, and certainly has had staying power but just never became that sort of household name or franchise. Should you watch it? Yes, you're going to need to. Just before dawn.
Welcome to Fright Night. For real.
So there you have it, a bunch more movies from 1985. This assortment was kind of obscure. There was definitely some lesser known ones in here. So my favorite one is probably the one that's the most known. It's Fright Night. Everybody loves Fright Night. I love Fright Night. I think you ought to too. If you don't, let me know why in the comments. Also, let me know which of these was your favorite down below there. Let me know which of these you haven't heard of before. Let me know which of these now sounds interesting that you want to seek out. Tell me that in the comments. Also, hit that like button if you like this video. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoy that, and hit the bell to get notified about new videos. And check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines and help support this channel. And yeah, we still have quite a bit more to go in 1985. There's still some heavy hitters waiting for us. So come on back and check us out right here on The 80s Project.